The Lenovo Z6 Pro is a huge step in the right direction for Lenovo's flagship mobile division. They tried to make a comeback last year with the Z5 Pro, but personally it was far too flimsy, buggy, and just a bit of an afterthought. However, without the Z5 Pro, Lenovo would have never learned from their mistakes and actually listened to their consumers' preferences. Thanks to the Z5 Pro, the Z6 Pro turned out to be a masterpiece in its own unique but simplistic way. That's not to say the Z6 Pro is the perfect smartphone, but rather a promising future for the company provided they start being honest, but more on that later. The phone itself feels solid and very well built, which is saying a lot when its predecessor from just a few months back felt quite quirky. With a Gorilla Glass back and front split by an aluminum frame, I must say it actually feels better than the Mi 9, and Xiaomi is known for quality builds. The unique simplicity I spoke of earlier starts to come into play when you take a look at the overall design of the device. At the back of the black version I have here, there is a pinstripe red glow running straight through the camera lenses and branding which is original in the sense that I've never seen this before, and simplistic in the sense that the stripe almost allows the cameras and branding to fade into the background, which in turn gives it a look of elegance. But once you go flashing the back of your phone in the sunlight, you get this satisfying pinstripe reflection thing happening parallel to the main stripe, which adds to its character. There are 4 hidden cameras in this red stripe, but Lenovo initially stated this would be a 100 megapixel setup, which is one of the lies I was speaking of earlier. The main lens is a 48 megapixel Samsung GM1 sensor. This is not the same 48 megapixel camera that everyone has come to know and love. I'm speaking about the Sony IMX586 sensor, which was seen on the Mi 9, View 20, Red Magic 3, and so on. It may not be the first choice 48 megapixel lens since it's actually 12 megapixel hardware interpolating to 48 megapixels, but I have tested it out and it does a more than decent job. The second lens is a 16 megapixel ultrawide sensor which can shoot at 125 degrees, the widest around, and doubles up as a macro sensor. The third is an 8 megapixel telephoto lens for 2x optical zoom, and the last is a 2 megapixel dedicated video camera called Hypervideo, which insanely stabilizes video but unfortunately only does so at 720p. That same lens acts as a 3D TOF lens for better depth effect shots. But guys, that's all I'll be touching on in the camera department of this video, since I have already posted a full detailed camera review which mentions absolutely every aspect of all 4 cameras, including recording capabilities. So be sure to check that out by clicking the card above at the end of this video. On the right side of the phone we have the power button coated in red, which looks great, but is unfortunately not textured. Above this is the volume rocker, which looks pretty standard. At the top of the device you will find the headphone jack, which Lenovo have brought back as it was lacking within its predecessor, which certainly has me smiling. Unfortunately there is no IR blaster here. On the left it's clean right the way down to the SIM tray, which can fit 2 nano SIMs in, and yes, even a microSD card, which Lenovo also lacked in its older brother, which in my mind is a huge deal. At the bottom we have a USB Type-C port, which unfortunately only supports USB 2.0 speeds, but that's pretty much the case with all budget-friendly phones, so no need to be upset. The speaker on the right of the charging port has a unique design and sounds great with no distortion, and the earpiece above the selfie cam acts as a second speaker too, but unfortunately isn't loud enough to have any effect, which is disappointing since Lenovo have included Dolby Atmos in here for media and gaming. There is also no presence of a notification light, which may bother some. The screen itself is a 6.39-inch Super AMOLED display with Full HD Plus resolution and minimal bezels thanks to the tiny teardrop notch at the top which houses the 32 megapixel selfie cam, which I also covered in my camera review, so be sure to check that out later. The screen is crisp, vivid and bright, which is brilliant indoors, and in the display settings you will find a feature called brightness enhancement, which automatically ups the brightness even more when in very harsh sunlight, but at the cost of extra battery and overheating. There is also a DC backlight option, which reduces screen flicker in dark environments. Guys, these are excellent features, and I am really happy to see Lenovo stepping up their game. Unlocking the phone can be done by using Lenovo's 2nd generation in-display fingerprint sensor, which in my experience has been one of the most consistent and reliable sensors I've ever used. It may not have the speed of one, say, on the Mi 9, but it never gives me trouble, and in my opinion that is more important than being a fraction of a second faster. The biggest issue I have with it is that the fingerprint sensor does not light up when you tap on the phone, so you have to move it or lift the phone slightly to light up the sensor. You can also unlock the phone using Face Unlock. This is not a 3D Face ID system, but rather uses the cam, so it's not very secure, but it's snappy. If it weren't for the unlock animation, which cannot be disabled, it would be as quick as the fastest around. Once you're in the phone, you're treated to ZUI 11, which is skinned on top of Android 9 Pie, which is pleasing to see since the Z5 Pro is still running Oreo. I know Lenovo is not known for updates, but in the first 2 weeks of using the device, I've received 2 updates, which makes me feel like Lenovo are a little more serious this time around. ZUI 11 is much better than the last generation ZUI 10. It has a lot less clutter and actually looks more stock than most phones. But if you're anything like me, I'm a third-party launcher kind of guy, and I was thrilled to find out that I can use Nova Launcher as my default launcher, unlike other Chinese ROM phones from the likes of Nubia and Huawei. Pairing a third-party launcher with ZUI 11 makes for a fully customizable, clean, elegant-looking OS. Getting around the user interface is a bit of a toss-up though. You have the regular 3 navigation keys, but then you have this thing called 4D Touch, which is essentially full screen gestures with a strange twist, which I am not the biggest fan of. To go back, you have to swipe up from anywhere on the bottom of the screen. To go home, you have to swipe and hold anywhere from the bottom of the screen. And to view recent apps, you have to swipe in from the lower left or right of the screen. Like I said, it's weird, but strangely enough, I got used to it pretty quickly and find myself attempting the same gestures on other mobile phones without even realizing. There are some funky phone movement gestures such as clapping for WeChat Pay, chopping for flashlights, and twisting for camera, but they are more of a gimmick than anything else. The notification panel looks pretty standard, except for the lack of the settings shortcut gear icon, which really annoys me, but you get used to it after a while. When you do find the settings menu icon, you will be treated to some great and some bizarre features. First on the list is HDR10 Ultra HD Vision, which is great, but unfortunately this is a Chinese ROM phone and only supports Chinese apps. And with no mention of a global launch, it's unlikely to see this feature available for other apps on this phone. We also have an always on display option, but it seems like Lenovo don't quite understand the always part of it. There is no way of having it stay on for longer than 5 seconds, and the only way to see it is by moving or raising the phone. It's not the end of the world, but this is an ambient display, not an always on display. Get your facts straight, Lenovo. There is also something called ZUI Lab, which includes experimental things. There is an interesting feature known as Magic Input Box, which spreads out the text box when full in order to see all that you have typed for better review and editing, but it's limited to few apps. However, the only real interesting thing within ZUI Lab is Game Mode, which utilizes performance and has a few extra little options to aid you in fully immersing yourself while gaming. Speaking of performance, the Z6 Pro comes with 6, 8 or 12 gigs of RAM and the latest and greatest 7nm Snapdragon 855 processing chip. And if you haven't heard of it by now, all you need to know is that it is and will be the best processing chip in a smartphone until the last quarter of 2019. But having the best chip around doesn't mean it's the fastest phone around, as optimization plays a major role in this. I recently ran an Antutu bench test comparing this to the S10 Plus, Mi 9 and Nubia Red Magic 3, and it came in third with a little over 360,000 points, which is still impressive since the S10 Plus was last, but falls slightly short of the Mi 9, which is its biggest rival in this department. The good thing is, I placed the Mi 9 next to the Z6 Pro in a speed test recently, and they came ridiculously close. Be sure to check that out after this video. Gaming on the Z6 Pro is great thanks to the immersive display, and the phone stays nice and cool thanks to a copper cooling pipe embedded in the device. The Red Magic 3 includes a liquid and air cooling, and yet the Z6 Pro managed to stay cooler after a bench run. That's impressive if you ask me. The 7nm chip also makes for a longer lasting battery, which is great since the phone already comes with an impressive 4000 mAh battery, which means insane battery life, right? Well, not quite. It hasn't been through my drain test yet, but with regular use I am sitting at around 10% battery remaining by the time I hit bed at the end of the day, where I usually have over 30%. It's not terrible, but don't expect more than 1 day battery life here. It's strange though, since its predecessor came with a 3350 mAh battery and had a 10nm chip and lasted as long as the Mate 20X, which had a 5000 mAh battery. But let's not jump to conclusions yet. Stay tuned for my full battery drain test on this device. When needing to top the battery off, Lenovo have included a 27 watt fast charger, but at the back of the charging block it clearly states 2 options. one adding up to 27 watts, and the other adding up to just 15 watts, which is the true rate the Z6 Pro charges at. Lenovo didn't lie about including a 27 watt charging block, they just misled us to believe it actually charged at this rate. I recently put the phone through a charging test against some of the top phones, and it fully charged from 0 to 100 in just under 2 hours, which is disappointing to say the least. Nevertheless, it is still fast charging and is still quick enough to reach 50% in just 30 minutes. Make sure to check my charging test video out after this to see how it compared to the other devices in its price range. The Lenovo Z6 Pro does not have the fastest wired charging, wireless charging, an IP certification, NFC, or a more capable IMX586 sensor where the Mi 9 includes all of this except for the waterproofing. I mention the Mi 9 here so much because it seems to be the Z6 Pro's biggest rival, and at just $40 more than the Z6 Pro seems like the better overall purchase. However, the Z6 Pro has a headphone jack, microSD card support, a bigger battery, extra camera, better selfie cam, a more solid and appealing design, and a much smaller camera bump. It may not be the best smartphone around, or even the best in its price range for that matter, but it checks a lot of the right boxes. It includes some serious hardware and even does a decent job in the software department. That being said, this won't become my daily driver, but neither did the Mi 9. What I can say is that you get what you pay for. And at a starting price of just $430 USD, the Z6 Pro includes many things that phones twice its price have packed in, which in itself is a brilliant reason to make the purchase. If you can only afford exactly what the Z6 Pro will set you back by, then honestly, there is no better top-end budget phone around at this moment in time.